The sun was folding itself into the western hills when this story truly began. Its last light stretched long across the prairie, painting the land in amber and blood, the sort of colors that make you wonder if the earth itself is aching or merely resting after another hard day. The wind carried with it the smell of dry sage, dust, and the far-off smoke of chimneys. And with that smoke came voices, soft, bitter, mocking as only a small town can be. They laughed then, quiet at first, like coyotes circling in the distance, then sharper, louder, filling the saloon and spilling into the street. Their boots hit the floorboards with rhythm. Poker cards slapped against tables. Whiskey glasses clinked, and over it all the gossip ran wild. He's gone and done it. A crippled boy, can you believe? Brought him home like a stray pup. He'll ruin that ranch sure as dust ruins rainwater. The words carried on the wind, brushing against the man they spoke of, though he never flinched. He was a quiet soul, one carved by years of labor and silence. His name mattered little to the tale, for names fade in time, but the shape of his presence lingered. A man in his early 30s, shoulders broad from work, eyes weathered from loss, voice rarely raised above a murmur. Folks thought him odd, maybe even weak. He had never married, never sought out saloon laughter or card tables. Instead, he worked his patch of land on the edge of town, stubbornly, steadily, like a man married to dust and duty. It was this man who, one late afternoon, brought home an orphan boy. The boy was no ordinary child. He was about 10 years old, though thin as if the world had starved him shorter. His left leg dragged behind him when he walked, a crooked reminder of some accident long past. He limped in silence, eyes cast downward, shoulders tight as if bracing for a blow that never came. He was not used to kindness. He was used to pity and worse, mockery. The town saw him hobble alongside the rancher, small hand clutching reins too heavy for him, and they roared. To them, it was the most foolish thing they'd seen. A man alone, already struggling to keep his land, and now he took in a boy who could not even run, let alone ride. But the man did not answer their laughter. He kept his eyes forward, boots steady, one hand resting gently on the boy's small shoulder, as if to tell him, without words, that he belonged. That night, the ranch house glowed dim in lantern light. The boy sat stiff at a wooden table, staring at bread and beans as though they were a trick. The man across from him ate slowly, as if silence itself were supper. At last, he slid his own portion toward the child. The boy shook his head, embarrassed, muttering that he was not hungry. But the man only nudged the plate closer, his cracked hand steady, his gaze neither stern nor soft, just certain. The boy ate, and though he didn't know it yet, trust had begun its first quiet step. The days that followed were not easy. The boy tried to help with chores, but the earth seemed set against him. Buckets slipped from his grasp, spilling water back into the dust. His limp slowed every errand. His arms trembled at the weight of saddles. And once, when cattle scattered wild across the field, he tripped and lay sprawled while the rancher ran alone to corral them. From a fence line, neighbors snickered. One man called out across the distance, voice sharp as a spur. "That boy'll break you faster than the drought. Mark my words." The boy heard, and shame flushed his cheeks red. He would not meet the rancher's eyes that night. He sat in silence by the fire, staring at the floorboards, fists clenched at his useless leg. But the man never scolded him. Instead, he handed him a small task, polishing a bridle, brushing a horse's mane, simple things that required no running. When the boy asked why, voice brittle, the man said only, "Every hand has its work. Yours will find its place." No lecture, no pity, just certainty. And something in those words, something in the man's steady presence, planted itself deep inside the boy. There were moments, brief and fleeting, when the hardness cracked. By the creek one afternoon, the boy slipped in mud and landed flat. He expected anger or laughter. Instead, the man simply reached down, pulled him up, and grinned faintly at the sight of mud streaked across the boy's nose. The boy laughed then, a small, startled sound like he'd forgotten how. It echoed off the water and hung in the air longer than it had any right to. At night, the man would sometimes take him outside, pointing at the vast sky stretched across the prairie. He spoke of stars as though they were neighbors. The hunter, the bear, the wagon that never tipped. The boy listened, wide-eyed, forgetting his limp in the pull of that endless sky. Still, doubt lingered heavy. Each time the boy tripped, each time laughter from town drifted on the wind, he shrank a little smaller inside himself. He had been told his whole life he was a burden, a mistake. He believed it too easily. One evening, after a day of clumsiness and jeers, he whispered, barely audible over the crackle of the fire, "Why'd you pick me?" The man stirred the coals, slow, patient, as if the answer needed heat before it could be spoken. At last, without lifting his eyes, he said, "Because you're worth keeping." The boy said nothing. He turned away, tears burning though he would not let them fall. In the silence, the fire popped, the prairie wind sighed against the shutters, and something shifted. It was not trust fully grown, but a seed watered in darkness. The town did not see this. To them, the boy remained a cripple and the rancher a fool. They laughed louder each time they passed, voices carrying like dust devils across the land. But inside that lonely ranch house, at a table worn by years, two lives began weaving together, slow and fragile, like threads on an old loom. And though the boy did not know it yet, the day would come when those same townsfolk who mocked would stand in stunned silence, watching him rise higher than they ever believed possible. But that is for later. For now, in this first chapter of their bond, there was only a man, a boy, a fire, and the faint beginnings of belonging. The kind of belonging that grows not from grand gestures, but from bread shared, stars named, and silence carried together. The seasons turned in their stubborn way, and with them the days of boy and man wove into something that looked like a life. Dawn would break with the call of roosters and the creak of leather as the man saddled his horse. The boy, still limping, still unsteady, would try to follow. He was small against the sweep of the prairie, his shadow tilting to one side where his crooked leg dragged the dust. At first, it was clumsy work. He carried buckets from the well, spilling more water than he saved. He tried to stack hay, but toppled in the pile himself. When cattle startled and broke into a run, the boy froze, unable to give chase, watching helplessly as the man thundered off on horseback. By the time the herd calmed, shame weighed heavier on him than the dust on his boots. From the fence lines, neighbors jeered. A rival rancher, a thick-chested man with teeth always bared in something between a sneer and a grin, leaned on his post and hollered across the land, "That boy's more trouble than he's worth. You'll lose that ranch for summer ends." The boy heard it, and it carved into him like a blade. His fists balled, nails biting into skin, but he said nothing. He never answered. He only turned away, shoulders drawn up like a shield. But the man never flinched. He carried on, steady, quiet, as if jeers were no more than the rustling of grass. When the boy sulked that evening by the fire, the man did not lecture. Instead, he slid his saddle across the floorboards. "Polish this." The boy frowned. "That's women's work." The man's eyes lifted, calm but sharp. "It's a cowboy's work. Keep your gear alive. It keeps you alive." So the boy polished. And though his arms trembled and the cloth slipped, by the time lantern light dimmed, the saddle gleamed. For the first time, the boy felt he had given something back. Day by day, small tasks became his world. Brushing horses, filling troughs, counting calves at dusk with careful eyes. While his legs betrayed him, his mind began to sharpen. He noticed which cattle wandered most. He remembered which pasture still held grass when drought bit others dry. He listened when the man explained ledgers, how trade was as vital as muscle. What he lacked in strength, he began to build in thought. It was the neighbor woman who saw it first. She was older, with hair as silver as the creek surface at dawn. Some said she was a healer, though she never called herself that. She came by with bread and herbs, her sharp eyes softening when they landed on the boy. "He's not weak," she told the man in her matter-of-fact way. "He just ain't been given the right work yet." The boy, listening from the doorway, held her words tight like a coin in his pocket. But the rival did not see what she saw. The rival, who dreamed of owning every acre of land that stretched beneath the sun, sharpened his words like knives. At the saloon, he spread his poison. That rancher's soft, raising a cripple like he's kin. That land'll be mine for the years through. And the town, eager for gossip, lapped it up. The boy knew it. He heard whispers whenever he limped through town beside the man. Women shaking their heads, men spitting in the dirt, children pointing and laughing. He kept his eyes low, burning inside with the promise that one day, he would make them eat their laughter. But when he whispered it one night, voice sharp as a knife in the dark, the man only shook his head. You don't owe them proof. The boy bristled. They call you a fool because of me. The man stirred the fire, calm as ever. Let them. Fire burns hotter when the wind feeds it. Don't waste your breath on their smoke. The boy turned away, frustrated. But deep inside, some part of him held on to those words, though he didn't yet understand them. Then came a night when clouds rolled thick across the prairie and rain hammered the roof. Lightning split the sky like a whip. The boy couldn't sleep. He rose and found the man outside, lantern swinging, checking the corral. The storm roared, the cattle restless, but the man's steps were steady. The boy followed, though mud sucked at his boots and his bad leg ached sharp as a knife. He slipped, fell, and for a moment lay sprawled, staring at the rain. The rival's laughter, the town's jeers, all echoed in his mind. But then he rose, limbed crooked, soaked to the bone, but he rose. He limped after the man, shoulders squared, refusing to be left behind. When dawn broke, the storm passed, and cattle still stood safe within their fences. The boy collapsed in the barn, trembling with exhaustion. The man knelt, draped a blanket around his shoulders, and spoke the words that would stay with him forever. You're no burden. You're the reason this place holds together. The boy didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat closed, tears hidden in the crook of his arm. But from that day, he carried himself differently. Not strong, not yet, but steadier, like a seedling pushing against the wind, stubborn enough to reach for the sun. And so, as roots digged deeper in silence, their bond grew. The prairie still whispered doubts. The rival still circled like a wolf. But in the heart of that ranch house, in the quiet between chores and firelight, boy and man were becoming more than what the world had named them. They were becoming family. The prairie has many faces. Sometimes it smiles with green grass swaying like waves, fat cattle lowing against a blue sky. Other times, it turns cruel, its beauty stripped bare until only dust and bone remain. It was in one such season that the boy and the man faced their hardest trial. The rains did not come. Clouds rolled across the horizon, heavy with promise, but broke apart before reaching the land. Wells ran shallow, troughs dried. Cattle, once fat and proud, grew restless, ribs showing sharp beneath hide. The prairie grass turned brittle, snapping underfoot like old paper. The rival was waiting. He had always been waiting. His ranch lay fat with stolen water rights and influence in town. He circled the man's land like a buzzard circling bone, whispering to anyone who would listen. That fool can't keep his herd alive. Mark me, he'll be selling his land before autumn, and I'll be the one to buy. The boy heard it in town, as he always did. Men spit the words like tobacco. Women shook their heads, pitying the man for wasting himself on a cripple. The boy's jaw tightened, his limp more pronounced as he hurried from their eyes. But at night, when a man sat with his ledgers, rubbing at tired eyes, the boy leaned closer. He watched, studied, asked questions. Numbers fascinated him, not like schoolroom chalk, but like puzzles to be solved. He saw patterns, which pastures had lasted longest, which buyers paid more for lean seasons, which trades could stretch grain further. The man was slow to notice. He had always done things the hard way, the way his father had taught him, by grit, sweat, and silence. But one night, as he traced figures by lamplight, the boy reached across the table, his small finger pointing. If we move the herd north, to the hollow by the creek, they'll last longer. There's shade, less wind. The man blinked, surprised. He had not thought of it, and so they tried. The herd survived longer than expected. Not fat, but alive. Days passed, and the boy studied more. He suggested bartering weak cattle before they died, trading for supplies others would soon be desperate for. He saw the way drought was not just weather, but war, and he fought it with his mind. The man listened. Slowly, he began to trust the boy's ideas. And in that trust, something bloomed. One night, firelight flickering across tired faces, the boy leaned against the man's shoulder. It was not planned, not spoken. He simply folded there, as though the weight of the day had finally sought a place to rest. The man did not move. His large hand rose, hesitated, then rested gently on the boy's back. The boy's eyes closed. In the hush of crickets and night wind, he whispered one word, quiet as a prayer. Pa! The man's breath caught. He did not answer aloud, but in the stillness, his hand pressed once against the boy's back, steady and certain. From that night on, they were no longer simply a man and a boy. They were father and son. But storms have a way of testing what has only just taken root. The rival struck harder now. He offered to buy them out, mocking each refusal. He spread lies in town, saying the man was half mad, letting a cripple run his ranch. Some believed him. Others laughed. One evening, the boy stood before a mirror, staring at his crooked leg. His reflection wavered in lamplight, thin, frail, but eyes burning. He whispered to the glass, voice trembling but fierce, "I'll not be laughed at forever." He did not know the man had paused in the doorway, watching. The man said nothing, but in his silence was pride and a sorrow deeper than words. The drought worsened. The land cracked. The rivals circled closer. But within the walls of that ranch house, father and son clung to one another. In each chore, in each ledger, in each weary night spent side by side, they built something stronger than water or weather. A bond unbreakable. A bond the rival had no power to touch. And though the town still mocked and the future looked grim, the day was coming when the boy, no longer crippled in spirit, would stand before them all, and the prairie itself would seem to bow to his grit. That day had not yet arrived, but its shadow stretched long across the horizon, carried on the wind like the promise of rain. The drought reached its cruelest hour. The earth cracked open like an old scar. Dust rose in clouds with every step, clinging to boots, to cattle hides, to the breath in a man's chest. Wells dipped to mud. The herd stood thin, ribs like shadows against hide. And still the rival circled, his laughter carrying louder than thunder that never came. It was at the end of one blistered day that the moment came. The rival arrived with his men, riding hard, dust trailing behind like banners of war. They pulled up before the ranch, their horses snorting, their faces smug. The town followed, curious eyes, whispering mouths, eager for spectacle. They gathered like it was a holiday, waiting to watch the fool rancher lose what little he had left. The rival swung down, boots striking hard against dry earth. His grin cut wide. "Time's up," he said, voice sharp enough to slice the silence. "Sell the land, or watch it die under you. Everyone knows you can't run this place. Not with a cripple for an heir." The words rang out, cruel and certain, and laughter rippled through the crowd. For a long moment, the man said nothing. He stood steady, shoulders broad, face unreadable. Then, to the crowd's surprise, he stepped back. His gaze shifted not to the rival, but to the boy. And the boy, thin, limping, dust on his face, shirt patched and worn, stepped forward. The laughter grew louder. Some slapped their knees, others whispered in disbelief. A cripple facing down a ranch wolf? It was a joke too sweet for them to resist. But the boy's eyes were steady. His voice, though soft, carried across the dry yard like wind through canyon stone. "This ranch ain't dying." The rival barked a laugh. "And what'll you do, boy? Outrun me? Outfight me?" He sneered, gesturing at the limp leg. "You can barely stand." The boy's hand trembled at his side, but his voice did not break. "A man ain't measured by his legs. He's measured by grit, and I've more grit than you'll ever hold." Silence fell. The crowd shifted, uneasy. Something in the boy's tone, something sharp, certain, forged by fire, stole the laughter from their throats. The boy stepped closer, every limp deliberate, every step heavy with meaning. He began to speak of the land, how he had studied it, how he had counted each calf, how he had moved the herd where shade still lingered, how he had traded weak cattle before death stole their worth. He spoke numbers, plans, truths the rival had never considered. The crowd listened spellbound. And then he said it, clear as a bell cutting through the dust. This ranch is mine now. My father built it. I'll keep it. And no drought, no man, no mockery will take it from me. The rival's face darkened, anger flashing. He lunged as though to strike, but the man, the father, stepped forward at last, his hand heavy on the rival's chest. He spoke only once, his voice low, steady, final. You'll not touch my son. The rival faltered. For in that moment, with the boy standing tall beside the father, the crowd saw what the rival refused to see. Strength not in muscle, but in bond. Not in straight legs, but in unbroken will. The laughter was gone. In its place, silence. The kind of silence that means respect, the kind that means shame for those who mocked. The rival spat, cursed, mounted his horse, and rode away, his men scrambling after him. The town, left behind, murmured softly, their eyes now on the boy not with pity, but with something else entirely. That evening, as the sun bled out across the horizon, the ranch stood quiet. The boy sat on the porch, shoulders tired but lifted high. The man lowered himself beside him. Neither spoke for a long while. At last, the boy whispered, voice breaking like a dam. They listened to me, Pa. For the first time, they listened. The man's eyes misted, though he hid it in the fading light. His hand found the boy's shoulder, firm, steady, proud. You've taken your place, son. And in the hush of that prairie dusk, with dust glowing like gold in the last light, it was clear. The boy, once orphan, once mocked, once broken, had taken the throne of dust and claimed it as his own. Not by strength of legs, not by the world approval, but by grit, by will, by the quiet love that had stitched him whole. And so, my friend, the truth of this tale settles like ash after fire. Strength is not the straightness of a man's back, nor the surety of his stride. It is the courage to keep walking, even when the earth itself laughs at your feet. The boy who was cast aside became the air. The laughter that once chased him became silence, then respect. And the bond of father and son, forged not by blood, but by choice, was the strongest thing the West ever raised. So let this story ride with you tonight. Whatever limp you carry, whatever scar the world mocks, know this, you are no less. You are worth keeping. And before you go, if this story touched you, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell me where in this wide world you're listening from. For stories like these ride farther when hearts carry them on.